The Prepper Podcast, episode 28. All right.
They've got to know whether or not they're prisoners of Christ.
The American people would never vote for socialism. He said, under the name of liberalism, the American people will adopt every fragment of the socialist program.
The Prepper Podcast is an up-to-date survival podcast based on military, wilderness, and modern-day survival and may be found at theprepperpodcast.com. I am Ken Jensen, and this is the podcast about everything survival. My goal is to teach you strategies on self-reliance and to develop survival skills and critical thinking in everyone, resulting in a more resilient and more enjoyable life. This is episode 28. And for this episode, I have a pretty exciting episode. Today's topic is going to be all about chickens and their benefits and taking care of them, and even more. The show notes for today's podcast may be found at theprepperpodcast.com/028. And now for the news. I wanted to let you guys know that we have a new name for the survival budget. If I didn't already tell you, it is How to Be a Prepper. 1-year emergency preparedness list for survival. It's an all-inclusive plan to build self-reliance that will outlast greater than a 1-year disaster while helping you become debt-free and build a resilient investment portfolio and a resilient life. I just got an email today by one of the beta testers saying that they already love it, and they actually got their wife on board with it and everything else, and I think it would be really cool. I told them to make sure that they take a look at it and tell me that there are any. I know that there are problems because I've looked at it, but I wanted them to look at it and tell me what problems they have with it so that I can correct those problems before I put that out to the general public. All right, now the next thing is remember to give me an iTunes review at theprepperpodcast.com/iTunes. And if you go to theprepperpodcast.com/iTunes, it will take you. My website will redirect you straight to the iTunes page for my podcast, and you may give me a review, and you can make it 3 stars, 4 stars, hopefully 5 stars, and you can make a comment. And when you do that, you help me out tremendously. More people find it. This last weekend, we had a lot of fun, my wife and I. This is actually a pretty hectic podcast because I have to do these podcasts a little bit ahead of time because I am a full-time employee still. I'm working on building my business and everything, but I am still a full-time employee at a steel mill. Well, anyways, last weekend we took Saturday off and we went to Nashville, and we went to the Armory. And we shot some Uzis, 9mm Uzis, and we shot my handgun. We had a lot of really good fun. It was our 9-year anniversary. You'll see that I posted a photo on the Facebook page, which you can get to at theprepperpodcast.com/ you guessed it, Facebook. If you go to the Facebook page, then you'll be able to see the photo that I posted, and it's pretty cool because when we posted that photo, it's just some window crayon that I found at Walmart for a few bucks, and that photo's already been shared around the globe. It's kind of cool. I know that it hasn't had a ton of shares, but the fact that it is already international is a pretty cool thing. So go ahead, go to my Facebook page, and take a look at the photo that I posted, or that my wife posted, with what I wrote on the back of our vehicle. Okay? So go ahead and do that. Now for the discussion. I told you guys we were going to be talking about chickens. We're going to be talking about all about chickens. I wanted to tell you the benefits, what they need, what they eat. I wanted to tell you the problems that they have. I wanted to tell you all kinds of things. So let's go ahead and get started. First, I'm going to start on the benefits of having chickens. And I'm talking about just having my main thing is laying hens. Okay, we're big believers in having hens that lay eggs, and once they get a few years old, then they can graduate to meat, but they need to, or we're big fans of having the egg-laying hens first. So, the benefits of chickens is they are funny. That's the first benefit. When we had chickens, it was hilarious to watch those guys scratch. They would run up, and they would think, they'd think that they found a bug, and then they would scratch in one spot, and then they would run back real quick. They would just run back real quick, and they would look down on the ground, and then they would peck at the bug, and then they would move back up, and they would scratch, and then they would run back down and look back down in the spot where they were scratching, hoping that they got the bug up, and it's hilarious to watch them. And I don't care what people say. Each chicken has a personality. They definitely have a personality. They also have a pecking order, so it's funny to watch the pecking order in action. I'm going to pause it real quick because I have to cough really bad. All right, now that I got that cough out of my system, hopefully none of it made it onto the podcast. I don't think it did. But the chickens, they're just hilarious. Watching the pecking order, you'll see chicks that or you'll see hens that dominate the other ones, especially if there's not a rooster there. And they will, excuse me, I gotta clear my throat. Boy, that cough really got me a second ago. So, it's just funny to watch them. And we had ducks with them, and it was funny to watch the ducks as well. But really the chickens, and I don't really know what to say other than it's hilarious to watch their personalities. It's like watching a bunch of little kids run around. And we had them free range, so we had 8 of them, and they ran all around the place. And those chickens, each one was completely different. Some of them didn't really like us a whole lot, and other ones would just follow us everywhere we go. And we would walk out, and one of them would just fly over the fence just to get to us. We had other ones that we couldn't keep in the area that we kept them in. It kept getting out, and it would get into the garage. And I have 2 kayaks that I hang from the ceiling of my garage. It would get out of its area, and it would get into the garage, and it would hang out right there in the kayak. So that was a pretty funny chicken. Other ones would just hang out up in a bunch of different trees. We have a lot of trees in our yard, so a lot of them would like to stay up in the trees. So the next benefit of chickens is they give you a lot of eggs. I told you that I was a big believer in having chickens for eggs, having hens that lay eggs, and that's extremely important to me because it's kind of like, let's look at it this way. If you are doing poultry for meat, then you are effectively doing it like it's one big immediate gratification. So it's like flipping a house, all right? If you're a real estate guy, just think about it. It's like flipping a house. You build it up, you rehabilitate it, you make it big and fat, right? And then you slaughter it. You get all the meat all at once. You get all the energy and protein in that chicken, and then you have to go to the next one, build it up, and then slaughter it. But if you have those for eggs, then let's say like me, you had 8 of them, and you would sit there and you would let them provide you with food over and over and over again every single week. They would provide us more than what each chicken was worth over a couple weeks span, and it would continuously happen over and over and over again. And we would keep that chicken for about 3 to 4 years, and then when they're about 3 or 4 years old, they're still probably laying, but before the meat gets too hard or too nasty, we don't want to do that. We would get rid of them after about 3 or 4 years. We would graduate them to the plate. So they would work well in a soup or a casserole or something like that. That's when they would become meat. And probably about 8 weeks before that, you start your next batch of chickens, and you have them ready to lay before the other chickens are gone. What we would do is we would rotate them. I don't know if I have this later, but I'll just go over this now. What we would do is we would rotate the chickens. You would get about 3. Let's say you wanted to keep 9 of them, you'd get 3 each year. So you would keep 3 generations of your chickens, 3 chickens each year, and then on that last year, they would graduate, and you would have a new 3 chickens come in. So that's how we rotated our egg layers. All right. Now, I already mentioned chickens can give you a lot of meat. That's the third benefit of chickens, is they can give you a lot of meat, especially if you are in the business of fryers. If what you're doing is if you're basically just growing chickens for meat production, then you are going to get a lot of meat out of them. Let's see. They don't need near as much space, but it's higher quality meat if you do let them free range. But they will not be nearly as fat, they won't be nearly as plump, and they won't provide you as much meat. It will be a stronger meat, and it won't be quite as tender. So the thing is it'll be a higher quality meat, though, if you let them free range a little bit, and you don't necessarily have to let them free range as much as you would your laying hens, because you do want the chickens to eventually be on your plate. And usually those 8 to 12 weeks, and they're done. They're fryers. So 8 to 12 weeks, they're as grown as they're going to get, and then you're going to graduate them to a dish. So you can get eggs from a chicken, you can get meat from a chicken, and you can get entertainment from a chicken. That would be my benefits of chickens. Now, what do chickens eat? All right, chickens eat, well, first off, we would free range our chickens. Okay, so we allow them to just run wild. I didn't paddock shift because we didn't have enough to require paddock shifting. They never ran out. They always had what they needed. So we didn't free range them. We didn't paddock shift them or anything. We just free ranged them. So we would feed them everything that they would free range. So that's going to be bugs and seeds and things like that from the ground. They would also eat down on the grass a little bit, and they would during the winter months and some of the cooler days, they would eat organic chicken feed. We would give them organic chicken feed. And it would be that we would mix that with some crushed oyster shell. We would give them some sanitized eggshell. We would sanitize some eggshell and throw that back into the feed and stuff. Kind of give them some of that grit that they need. So it's always good to give them scratch and stuff like that. So we would free range them, and that's how we did it. But I do agree that the paddock shift method, especially if you have a larger number, is going to be a much better way of doing things. And what you're going to do in a paddock shift is, I don't want to get real in-depth with the paddock shift, but with the paddock shift, you basically are going to have a 4 or 5 segmented area. Like let's say you have a 10-acre plot. Well, that 10 acres is going to be separated into, let's say, 5 2-acre plots, and then those plots are you're going to rotate your chicken through those 5 different plots every week or so. And the first 50, like this is how you have to gauge how quickly you have to move them around. The first 50% of the grass, that's like filet mignon to those guys. As they're pecking and they're eating the grass down and stuff like that as well. The first 50% of that is like the filet mignon, and then the next 20% after that is like hamburger meat, and then the last 30% of that is actually a little bit poisonous to them. So you don't want to get down to the last 30% of the grass before you move them to the next paddock. You don't really have to think about these percentages. I'm just throwing them out there because if you shift them every week or two, then chances are is you're going to get your grass down to about 50 or 60%, and then they're going to move to the next spot. All right, so with the paddock shift, there were a couple different ways of doing it. One of them was to have a movable chicken coop, and the other one was to have a stationary chicken coop that all the paddocks were connected to, and you had a door for every single paddock. Here's the thing: if you're going to move them, then you want them to be asleep. All right. So that brings me into chicken tractors. It's kind of like a paddock shift if you want to think about it this way. It's just a really miniature paddock shift. If you only have 2 or 3 chickens, or if you have 4 or 5 chickens and a really big tractor that you use, it's just a big box, just a big cage that you can roll from place to place so that your chickens can move. The best way to do this, like I was saying a minute ago, is wait until they go into the little coop in your tractor. Wait till they go into the little coop and go to sleep, and then you shut the door on them or whatever, because once you do that, then you can move it. But if you try to move the chicken tractor while they're awake, I promise you that there is that one chicken who, for some reason, has a death wish, and it will do whatever it can to get in the way so that you will either hit it in the neck or you will break its leg. So you don't want to do it while they're awake. That's the problem with the chicken tractors is it's best if you do it while they're asleep. However, with the tractor, you probably will have to move it often throughout the day, so you may not be able to wait until they're asleep. But as far as the mobile chicken coop, if you're going to do a paddock shift with the mobile chicken coop, you definitely wait to move them until the evening after they've already gone into their coop and you can shut their doors. Now, there's a chicken run. I'm not going to say never to use a chicken run. I'm not going to tell people not to do that because I would prefer people to have their own eggs and their own chicken and be doing it using a run than to go to the grocery store. I bet the chickens in a run at your home is probably going to be better off than what you see as free-range organic chickens in the grocery store. But the fact of the matter is if you're feeding them organic feed and stuff like that, they're already going to be a little bit better for you than a lot of what you're going to get at the grocery store. It's just nice to know where your chickens are coming from. It's nice to know who's been handling your chickens and that your chickens had a good life before they met their demise. So I'm not going to tell you not to use a run, because for some people, that's the only way that they can do it. I don't believe that it's a sustainable way of doing it, but I believe that it is surely a way that you can do it. We did a free-range thing, but we did have a run, and it was completely void of grass, but they didn't stay in there. We let them out, and they would do whatever they wanted to do all day long, and then at night they would go back in their coop, and we would lock them up. They almost never used the run. The only time they used the run is when they wanted shade. They would go into the run, and they would hide in the trees in the run because it was very shady. Well, also right beside the run was a storage shed, and they loved to get underneath the storage shed, and they would lay in like holes underneath the storage shed in the dirt, and they would just hang out under there because of the cold dirt. So that's so you can have a run and be free ranging all at the same time. That's kind of what our method was, but to each his own. If you have to do a chicken run, then do a chicken run, whatever it takes to get you to raise your own chickens. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is treats, and it's going to be a very brief thing, but chickens have treats as well. I mean, if you serve them up some bugs and stuff, that's a treat. I will tell you one thing. We used to give them watermelon rinds. If you are eating down your watermelon, and then there's still going to be like some red or some orange or whatever, if you throw the rinds in there, the chickens will eat every bit of the red, and they will leave every bit of the green. I don't know how they do it, but they will leave every bit of the green left and get all of the red gone. I mean, you come back, and there will be none of that red meat of the watermelon left. They love the red part of the watermelon, and they love to eat the rind down until it's the green part. So you can throw your rinds in there. Probably the best thing that we found that we gave our chickens for snack would be mealworms. It's meal worms, mealworms. And if you go to if you go to poultry or if you go to feed shop or something like that and you go and buy mealworms, you're going to get a small container of mealworms. I'm talking small, like the same size as like a big spice bottle, like a big bottle of pepper. You can get something about that size in mealworms, and you're going to pay like probably about $10, $15 for it. I mean, the price of mealworms is outrageous. And those are old, and they're dehydrated and stored and stuff like that. Now, all of you guys know, I mean, you take meat and you eat it, and then you take beef jerky and you eat it. They are not the same thing. But the chickens love mealworms. They love the mealworms, even dehydrated. But what we found was very cheap is we had a container that we actually would use, and we grew mealworms. We actually farmed mealworms, and it was real easy. We kept flax and stuff for the bedding that they would crawl around in, so they stayed nice and clean. We would change stuff out, and the way we did this, excuse me, mealworms are actually the larva of a beetle, okay? So eventually they would turn into beetles, but the beetles would pretty much get eaten up by the mealworms. They cannibalize the adults, so you don't have to worry too much about the beetles. Anyways, so the mealworms, all you had to do was have a starchy food for them. So we always ended up cutting up potatoes and sticking it in the flax that the meal that we had in their bedding. So we would throw a couple hunks of potatoes in there, and throughout the week you would see that potato just disappear. And of course, like I said, they also would eat the beetles after they die, and they'll eat them. They'll actually eat other mealworms and stuff too. But these mealworms, all we would do is they would reproduce themselves. Okay, they always kept themselves reproducing. We never ran out of them, and just each day, ever so often, what we would do is we would grab a cup of the bedding and all the worms that were in that bedding, in that spot that we were grabbing it. We would just dump the whole cup out in front of the chickens where they were at, and they would come running, and you should see them. It's hilarious. It's like watching a bunch of kids fight over the last sucker in a candy store. It was hilarious watching them attack these mealworms and fight each other for these mealworms. It's just that goes back to the chickens being funny. It's just hilarious to watch these guys fight over these mealworms, and they loved every bit of it. So what we would do is we would get rid of that cup of mealworms and bedding, and then we would pour another cup of just bedding into the box where we were keeping the mealworms. It was a plastic tub that we were keeping them in. So you were always making up the bedding. And then the mealworms, as long as you didn't get their numbers down too far, which it's kind of hard to do, as long as you didn't get the numbers down too far, the mealworms would reproduce themselves. So you didn't really run out a whole lot, and the bedding was super, super cheap. Okay, so if you're going to keep chickens, I recommend at least give them their favorite snack and give them mealworms. And like I said, the mealworms are so expensive in the store, and they're really, really cheap to keep. They're cheap to farm. And you know what? If you decided that you wanted to create a little business, you could actually do mealworms like at a farmer's market or something like that. You could probably sell mealworms to a lot of the yuppies that have backyard chickens. You could probably sell mealworms to all the farmers and stuff as kind of like a it just depends on what quantity you want to produce it in, but you could sell it to them kind of like as a supplement or just as a snack for their chickens as well. All right. They also need water. They go through water a lot. They go through as much water as they go through food. We had to refill their water every single day, and we had 8 chickens. We had a 5-gallon water tub or a water feeder, whatever you want to call it, a waterer. We had a 5-gallon waterer, and the chickens, pretty much the whole 5 gallons was gone between 8 chickens throughout 1 or 2 days. So you've got to be prepared to redo their water. All right, so just be aware that that's another one of their needs. So the chicks actually need. If you're going to be growing these from eggs or whatever, what we did is we mail ordered chicks because we didn't want to have to deal with incubating the eggs or anything like that. So you bring the chicks in, you've got to have a place to put them, like a tub or we actually had a big tall kiddie pool and a heat lamp. They'll let you know how hot the heat lamp is, if it's too hot or too close or whatever. You want a certain temperature. Now, here's how we found out what temperature to keep the heat lamp at. It was just on or off, okay? So we didn't really adjust any temperature. This is how simple it is. It sounds more complicated until I tell you how to do it. We had a chair sitting right beside it, and we clamped the heat lamp onto the chair. And if the chickens moved over time, if they started to congregate away from the lamp, we knew to back the lamp off a little bit. And if they started congregating really close to the lamp, we knew to move the lamp a little closer. I know that sounds really, really tough to figure out, but that is the way you figure out whether your heat lamp is too close or too far away from the chicks to keep them comfortable. And they do need to stay warm, and they do need to be comfortable. And of the 8 chickens that we had, we lost absolutely none of them. So it's a very good way of doing it. Now, part of us losing none of them was the fact that we had them in the house. Oh boy, I will never again will we keep them in the house ever. They were smelly. And it wasn't, I doubt it was so much the chickens as it was the ducks that was in there. But we had them in one of the other rooms, and we checked on them every single day, so it wasn't that big a deal. And today you can't tell that we ever had them in there, but the 3 or 4 weeks, or I don't even remember how long we had them in there, we had different times for each one, but it really didn't matter a whole lot as long as we knew that they could handle the temperatures outside. But during the weeks that we had them in that room, man, it smelled so bad. I don't want to do that again. That's horrible. If I would do that again, it would be a dedicated room that I know is going to smell to high heaven all the time, and that is what it was appropriated for. Yeah. Not in the house, but check on them often. So especially if you're going to have them outside the house, like in your garage or in a shed or something like that, you need to check on them often. You need to make sure they're not pecking each other to death, because if one of them gets sick, the other ones could peck them and kill them and stuff like that. So, I mean, yeah, they got personalities, and yeah, they're hilarious, but they're really dumb animals as well. So you just need to understand that they peck each other a lot, and they can hurt each other. They can get sick. They can get respiratory diseases and stuff. So you need to check on your chicks often. All right. As far as once you move them out, then you need to worry about their shelter. What we had is we had a coop that unhinged halfway down, and we lifted the top of the coop up. Like, you couldn't fit in this coop. We had it elevated about 2 to 3 feet above the ground, and then the coop itself was about 4 feet tall. So, and I bet I'm even wrong about that. We had it about 2 feet off the ground, and the coop itself was about 3 feet tall. And there was a roof to it, and the roof came off. And in the roof was some roosts that were built into the coop. So this thing, I mean, take a coop and just cut it in half, top to bottom, right? So we're not cutting it like you would a double wide mobile home or anything like that. We're cutting it the other way. We're cutting it through the walls, separating the top from the bottom, and that's how ours happened. It was basically dead down the center. And we would lift that up, and we had a kickstand that was attached to it, and we would just lift it, and lay it down, and we could get in there and we could clean everything out. Which is my next point. In the shelter, you need to clean the shelter. It took us, we would clean every few weeks. You probably would want to clean at least every month if you did thick bedding. You're going to want to clean a little more often, or you can clean about every month, I guess, if you did thin bedding, and then you might want to do it just slightly more often if you did a thick bedding. We did a thick bedding, and we removed the top layer of the bedding. We didn't replenish the bedding until it got kind of low, and then we would just scrape it all out. Now, when you're replacing the bedding, we at first was using wood chips, and then we started using hay. So we really liked using the hay a lot more because it was cheaper, and I mean, the chickens didn't really care. They like it, and I've caught them eating on the hay as well. And I actually have videos on YouTube. It's not on my Clever Survivalist YouTube page or my Prepper Podcast YouTube page. It's on my personal page. So if you go to cleversurvivalist.com, and then over on the right hand up near the top, there will be a search bar, and you type in chickens. I know that I've posted those videos on cleversurvivalist.com. All right, so if you wanted to see the videos of the chickens that I had and my setup, then you can see that video. That was a long time ago, before I actually had planned on, running a podcast, and that was actually even before I was really, really into survival. I was just into sustainable living and stuff back then. So, yeah, that is what it is. Let's see, where was I? You need to keep it clean. You need to keep it clean, because if you don't keep it clean, you're going to promote sickness and possibly death. Opening and closing the coop door. The easiest and cheapest method is to go out there and open the coop door by hand every morning, and probably right before sunset, the chickens will already be in their coop, already ready to go to sleep, and you close the coop door by hand, and then you go out there the next day and open the coop. Another thing, a cool idea that I found was a guy who, and I've looked into a way to do this differently than him, but if you remember the Oldsmobiles and stuff like that had the antenna that would raise and lower when you started the car, the antenna would raise up, the antenna could lower back down. It was automatic. That was pretty cool, because if you used one of those motors, you could use that attached to a marine battery, 12-volt marine battery, attach that to a small solar panel, okay? And you could have it raise and lower the door based on the sun coming out. You use a light switch. They have the They have the ones that come on when the sun or when the lights go out, or goes off when the lights come on, stuff like that. You know what I'm talking about. It's got a light sensor, and you can use that to turn some relays on or off that would make that antenna motor go up and down, and that would do your door. Another way of doing it would not be based on light. You just throw it on a timer. That's probably the easiest way. If you're going to do your little solar panel in your battery bank or your individual marine battery, and you throw a timer on it, and it comes up at a certain time and goes down at a certain time. You might still want to check to make sure if you have the automatic function, if you care about losing one of them, then you may want to just check and look back and make sure that none of them are running around lost because they couldn't get back in the coop. You want to time it so that you don't have a chance for predators to show up, but your chickens will be able to get in there. It seems like I'm running a little long today because, well, this is something I've had a lot of experience with, so I'm just teaching you guys from some of the stuff that I know. All right, let's see. They like to take dust baths. They like to take lots of dust baths. Get them underneath their feather. It's sort of conditions their skin. So you'll need to give them a little area to take dust baths. Where they would sleep underneath my storage shed was some of the best loose dust that they like to roll around in too. So provide a place for that. And move them around a little bit so they don't get too smelly. If you keep them in the same spot at all times, they can get smelly. We actually kept our coop in the same spot all the time, but they didn't get smelly because they free ranged. They didn't stay in one little bitty chicken run all day long. The only time they stayed in the run was, well, actually when there was really bad weather and we didn't feel like opening the gate to let them into the yard, then they would stay in the run. And those days they would just get fed. They always did fine. So we always kept feed on hand. They just never ate it because they would prefer to go out and eat bugs and seeds and stuff. So during the rainy days, the chances were is the next day we'd have to go out there and refill the feed because they would eat a ton of feed, because they were probably a little bit spooked because of the weather, and then they also didn't get to free range and they were hungry. All right, so some of the problems, I know I've talked about some of them, just kind of peppered in there with the other things, but some of the problems with chickens is you got predators like raccoons, dogs, hawks, coyotes, foxes, and predator cats. It depends on where you're at. Some of these may or may not even be a problem. If you're in the suburbs, probably the only problems that you're going to have are like raccoons, maybe skunks, and hawks probably. There's no such thing as a chicken hawk. It's not called a chicken hawk. Chicken hawk was a name given to just about every hawk that would take a chicken. It's not called a chicken hawk. It's just a hawk. Any predator bird will go after a chicken, especially a small chick. That's the reason. That's one of the reasons why you wait to put them out in the open until they get a little bit bigger, is because even the smaller hawks and owls and stuff like that will try to get them. So once again, that list is raccoons, dogs, hawks, coyotes, foxes, predator cat. Sorry, I had to do a quick pause there. I started coughing like crazy. I don't know. My throat's just dry. I don't have a glass. I normally have a glass of water in here with me. I don't today because I'm in a hurry, because right now my dinner is on the table waiting for me to go eat. But I love you guys, and I do this podcast for that reason, so my dinner can wait, because I have to teach you about chickens. I talked about predators. Now let's go to the predators for eggs. There's things like minks and skunks and snakes and rats that love to come for eggs. A lot of these, if you have a a bunch of adult chickens, they will tear up a snake or a rat or something like that. But minks and skunks, maybe not so much. The thing with the chickens is they can, just about anything can kill them. All right, they can take some stuff out, but just about anything can kill them. I mean, you can have a chicken die from a snake or a skunk or a mink, even though it came for the eggs. It didn't come for the chickens, it came for the eggs, and a lot of them will just mangle the chicken to get to the eggs. So don't think that just because they're egg predators that they're not a problem for the chickens. Next would be pests. Worms, lice, mites, and ticks. I was going to go into all the details about worms, lice, mites, and ticks, but I'm not going to. And the reason is because I'm already at about 40 minutes, and I don't think I'm really that far. Well, yeah, I am actually getting pretty close. But I think just for the sake of time, I'm not going to go over the details, but chickens can get worms, they get lice, and then they get mice and the mites and ticks. And the mites and ticks, they come after blood. Lice are actually just eat on dead skin, but they itch the crap out of the chickens, and the chickens will actually end up defeathering themselves and pecking themselves until they bleed because of lice. So even though the lice actually don't cause problems, lice just eats dead skin, the chickens will cause their own problems because of how itchy they get from the lice. So you don't want lice either. And they can get worms, and worms are bad. We all know that. Worms are bad in other animals too. All right, let's go into some sicknesses. They have infectious bronchitis, and I'm not going to go into these real deep either. I mean, you can look each of these up just knowing the list. And if you go to my show notes at theprepperpodcast.com/028, you can get a list of everything that I'm talking about. All right, there's infectious bronchitis, avian pox, botulism, cholera, Merck's disease, and thrush. One thing that we had in one of ours was the infectious bronchitis, and all it did is it sat there and it wheezed a lot. We gave it some medicine and kind of kept it on its own, and we kept it out of the coop. Believe it or not, we kept it out of the coop and housed it in another location, just to make sure that all the chicken feathers and stuff like that didn't bother its lungs. So we kept it in as clean air as possible, and we kept it. We gave it plenty of nutrients, kept it away from the other chickens, and that's how we dealt with that. I already talked about paddock shifting, so I really don't need to go into that. Now, butchering. That is pretty much the last thing on my list of stuff to go over. We didn't do a whole lot of butchering since our chickens were egg layers. But, like I said, after about 3 or 4 years of laying eggs, you're going to want to graduate them to a casserole. So, if you have hens, if you're in the suburbs and all you want is hens, and you end up with a rooster, because guess what? You can't really tell. They don't sex them very well when they're really young. So you could order 8 hens and end up with 6 hens and 2 roosters, okay? And there's no guarantee that you're not going to get roosters. So as soon as they start crowing, all right, time to butcher them. Older hens, I already talked about the egg layers. When they get older, you want to butcher them before the meat is not very palatable. You can always eat the meat, but it's not going to be good quality, so you'll want to get rid of your older hens, more than likely, and bring up a new generation of egg layers. So, we want to butcher them. Not only do we want to butcher them, but we want to do it humanely. That's the important thing, is we want to be as humanely as possible. Now, believe it or not, You will not want to feed them the day before. Don't feed them the day before. Just let them go hungry that day. Go ahead, isolate them or whatever. I know that sucks, but you will thank me if you don't feed them the day before you're going to butcher them. Okay, because you're going to be dealing with a lot of stuff coming out if you do that. Now, when you are actually butchering them, believe it or not, there is a kind of a humane way to do it, and it's to hang them from their feet. I know that you would not like to be hung from your feet and knowing that you're going to have your head cut off or something like that. Okay, so I know that you're not going to like that. But the chicken, when you hang it, it actually calms it down. So you hang it from its feet. You tie like a string around 1 foot over a pipe or something like that, whatever you have, a hook or whatever, and then tie the other foot, or just tie both feet and then hang it from a hook. All right? But either way, you're going to hang it upside down, and it'll just sit there, and it'll calm down. If you want, you can calm it down even more by rubbing its neck, or I guess you could say underneath the chin, almost. That could calm it down a little bit more, but you just want to calm it. Just calm it down, and once it's calm, you need to cut its jugular. Where everybody knows, just either side of your voice box is where a lot of people would check for a pulse. In CPR, you check for a pulse there, and if it gets cut, it's a very bad spot to get cut because you will bleed out. Well, that's what you're going to do with the chickens. You're going to cut it. And yes, they can feel it a little bit. It feels like a pinch to them. But this is the most humane way of doing it. With them hung upside down and with them calm, you cut the jugular and you let them bleed out. And it will get even calmer, and it will just go to sleep. That's how it'll happen. It'll just go to sleep, and then it will die. That is the most humane way to do it. Now, once you've done that and it is dead, you're not going to have it flopping all over the place if you do it this way. If you just put it on a block and decapitate it, it's going to go running all over the place. And I can't tell you how many stories I have of us as kids and the dead chicken running all over the yard and stuff and scaring half of us, and then the other half of us are running after the chicken. Oh, life on the farm was very fun. All right, so you will want to go ahead and decapitate it after it's dead. Well, now you have a dead chicken. That's all you have. You don't really have, you have all the feathers in the way and everything else. So the next thing you're going to do is we're going to scald the chicken. Now, you don't need to have boiling water. Okay, your water doesn't have to be a rolling boil, because you're going to cause problems if you do that. Get yourself a turkey fryer on a propane burner, and you heat it up using a thermometer to 165 degrees Fahrenheit. And if you want, the best way to scald it is just to go ahead and dunk the whole chicken into 165 degree water for about 30 seconds. Pull it up, start pulling on the feathers to see if they're loose, and they should come right off. I've known other people to even make it easier is to next put them in an ice bath for a little while and then bring them back over and scald them again and see if the feathers come out even easier. Okay, so consider the fact that you can scald them, then ice bath them, and then scald them again. All right, so the feathers should pluck nicely whenever you're done. There will be some small hairs left. That's normal. There's going to be some small hairs left. What you'll do with that is you will take a propane torch to it. You could also, it's like the 1 gallon propane tanks. You got a torch that you could use. go ahead and take that torch to the body. Just go real quick over it, okay? You're just trying to singe the small hairs that are going to become feathers. You're just trying to singe those off real quick. And yes, it's going to stink. It's going to smell like burning hair, and you might smell a little bit of burning skin, but you're not doing it fast enough to actually burn all the skin. Okay, so you just use a propane torch and go over the body real quick to move all the stray hairs. And now you have essentially a butchered chicken, except we haven't cut it open or done anything with it. And at this point, I'm going to cut it off because we are going on about 50 minutes now. And you guys will just have to think about cutting it, filleting it, and cutting the breasts out and getting the legs off and stuff like that. Just real quick, whenever you're trying to cut this stuff, cut through the tendon. And whenever you're cutting into the chicken, make sure that you know where you're cutting, because you don't want to get into those food pouches, all right? Because it is nasty. You don't want to deal with that mess. Well, I guess that's it. Please go to theprepperpodcast.com/iTunes. Make sure to check out my videos of the setup that I had. Just go to cleversurvivalist.com, look in the search bar, and type in chickens, and just look through those. Eventually, as you scan through a few of those posts, you'll see one of them has some videos, and you'll be able to watch those videos and see what my setup is like. And I had lots of fun last week in Nashville. And let's see, this week, remember I told you guys a while back that we were doing a prepper group? Well, come more than likely tomorrow, we're going to be doing another session. Last week, or last time we met, it was me showing everybody how to connect inverters and stuff to their vehicles and how to power their home. Well, this session is going to be it's going to be us showing people how to do canning, and we're going to be doing the water bath method of canning. We're not doing pressure canning, so this is low pressure canning. I know that we have plans to do pressure canning later, but it's one subject at a time, and each person chips in their knowledge. So if you're in the Jackson, Tennessee area, all right, I'm not going to tell you exactly where I'm at, but I will tell you that I am in the Jackson, Tennessee area, and I'm in the Memphis area, and I'm in the Nashville area. So anywhere between Nashville and Memphis, if you want to hang out, you want to meet up, and you want to learn some stuff, then you can probably email me and get a hold of me on Facebook or anything like that. That would be theprepperpodcast.com/Facebook. And you can get a hold of me. You can email me at ken@theprepperpodcast.com if you wanted to, and put something in there like local prepper group or something like that in the email, in the subject line of the email. And just ask me if you could join or whatever, but you've got to be willing to travel within our area, and because our meetings are in different locations just about every time. So, with that being said, if you would like to be part of that local group, then go ahead and email me at ken@theprepperpodcast.com and put something like local meetup in the headline or in the subject line, and I will be sure to get back to you about where you can meet us at. I think this thing is going to grow a little bit. I don't know how many people are going to come out of my audience, since my audience is a global audience, but it would be really cool to see some of my audience members or some of our community members there at this local meetup. And if you have anything that you could teach people to do, then you are exactly the person that we're looking for. We're not looking for experts. We are looking for people who know some specialty skills that they can teach others. All right? So with that, this is Ken from theprepperpodcast.com I will see you guys next week.